Hey crafty friends, it's Rick. I'm back with another video. Today we are using products from Pixi Dust Designs and we're going to make a Christmas card. We're going to use the Pixi Dust Designs sketch for October. I'll pop that picture right up there. We're going to be using the Snowman and Santa's sock die as well as the Christmas 6x6 pattern paper. And that stamps, this die set also has a stamp that goes with it. So we're going to use that sentiment. But we are going to take our little sock and some of the other pieces that I've already pre-cut, and we're going to add a little ink blending to those. All right, I'm going to take a sponge dauber, and I'm going to add a little shadow around the edge of our sock. Because our little snowman needs some shading. So there's our shading for our sock. I've got to do the little shading on his little heel and his toe. And I did cut out a couple of those of each one because they are on the same die set. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little shadow to each one of these, because we all know Rick will probably lose one before we get to it. So I'm just going to add a little shadow to all of those just in case I need to back up. And then I'm going to add a little shading to my focal panel that I've already used an embossing folder on and embossed. I just want to add a little color around the edge. And while I'm using the same color, I'm going to go ahead and do all those parts and pieces that have the same color. I just want a little color back there to draw your eye. All right, we need to add a little bit of shading to the other little parts as well. I've got my back piece of my scarf, and I've got the band of his little hat. I'm going to add a little bit of shading to those. I'm going to add a little bit of shading to the detail part of the scarf, as well as his little nose. I'm going to start off with the little nose because it's going to be easier, and I'm just going to use sponge daubers for this because I just need a little bit of color. And it will be a little easier to do this with the sponge daubers than it is to try to use a brush. And I'm just going to pick one side and add a little shading to each one of these pieces, just using my distress inks. I'm going to do my little scarf here. And I just picked a shade that's a little bit darker than the cardstock. And if you wanted, you could do this with markers if you wanted to. I'm just going to do it with our little sponge daubers. All right, now we're going to glue our parts and pieces to our little sock. And if ever you are not sure about something, always flip over the back of the packaging. Look at that. That way you know how it's supposed to look. So I'm going to move my little sock out of the way for a second, and we're going to layer up our pieces. I do have my tweezers. I'm going to use those. So I'm going to add little dots of liquid glue behind the band of the hat. And I will add that. Let's make sure I turn that the right direction. We got our base of our scarf. We'll add little dots behind our striped piece, our layering piece, to add this. And you can always, as you're gluing, put a block on top of it to let it dry. I based my color palette off of my pattern paper that I picked for our sketch today. And remember, you can download that sketch in the Facebook group, the Pixi Dust Designs VIP Facebook group. It'll be available as a free download in there in the file section. And they are 8.5 by 11, and you can print them out and put them in a notebook. That's the best way to do it. Okay, we're going to add his little toe of his sock. So I'll just add liquid glue behind that. Add on my little toe. And luckily, I did not lose a heel or a toe. So that is great. We've got our heel. So we'll just add that on. And this I always can never remember which way it's supposed to go. That's why I had to pull the back of the packaging in so I could remember it, and I still forgot. All right, so there is our little heel. Now we will add his little hat, and we're just going to add liquid glue behind that. And I'm just going to go right across the top of that sock. And then we've got his little scarf. And come down right about there. And then we're going to do his little face. Sometimes I have to pick it up with the pickup tool and then grab it with the tweezers. All right, so we've got one little eye. And you may want to put down your nose and mouth first so you can get the eye placement right. I'm just going to pick it up. So we'll add liquid glue behind this one. And I'll turn that around so I had it right the first time. There's his other little eye. We'll go ahead and do his little mouth. Make sure I got the right side going out. One side's a little bit more beveled than the other side, so you can see our little snowman sock is coming right together. We've got his little carrot nose. And you could turn his nose whichever way you want. So we're going to add a dot right there and a dot right there. And we're going to add his little lumps of coal for his buttons. Now you could totally leave those and add in a rhinestone or something. That would be cute too. All right, so there is our little snowman sock. So we're going to move him to the side, and we can stamp our sentiment and start building our card. All right, I have a die cut oval that I'm going to stamp my sentiment on. So we're going to take and peel this off. And I will line it up, and it says, you know you're old when you want socks for Christmas. And that's really true. So we're just going to make sure we have that lined up. And then I will stamp that using VersaFine Nocturne ink. All right, so for the base of my card, I've got a standard A2 top folding card base. I have 4 pieces of pattern paper. One I've cut for the inside. This is just 3/4 of an inch by 4 1/4. I've cut it just for the inside of our card. I'm going to line it right up at the bottom. Just like so. And then our sketch calls for 3 pieces, and they could be any size or whatever shape. I chose to do 1 inch by 4 1/4, and I picked 3 different patterns that coordinated. So I'm going to add the different pattern right on the center, and then I'll add my other 2 pieces of plaid paper right on the along the bottom and the top. So I'm going to start with that center piece from our card sketch. And I'm going to put that right in the center of our panels. And then we will add our second pattern. Just like that. And then we'll add the mirror piece up at the top if Rick can hold on to it. So we'll add that one right up there. Just make sure we've got that straight. All right, now we've got our focal panel that we're going to add on, and we are going to pop that up. And I'll just add a couple strips of foam tape onto our panel. And I'm going to cut this in half. That way I can add one on this side and one on this side. Just trim off that extra. So I'll add that on our little snowman. Here, we'll peel these backings off. I'll add some liquid glue so I can move it around a little bit. I'll center that onto my card front. Now I'll cut a little bit more foam tape to add behind the rest of our little snowman. I'll just add some strips here. That way anything extra I can just stick on the back of the release paper there. I'll peel these off. And this is thin foam tape, so there's not going to be that much dimension that it's going to be super bulky. It's always something to remember when you're doing cards or Christmas cards, especially. Try to keep that bulk down so it'll go through the mail with only one stamp. All right, we'll add some liquid glue on our foam tape. And then we're going to add our little snowman, and I'm going to kind of cock him over to the side like that. And we've got our little sentiment here. I'm going to actually add that piece of foam tape right on that other side. That way everything will be nice and level, on the same level. So I'll add liquid glue behind this. And then we will add that onto our card. All right, because it is a little snowman, we are going to add some glitter. I needed to find my two-way glue pen because I'm only going to add some glitter on one side of our sock. I'm going to add it to the toes as well. Let me grab a scratch piece of paper. I'm going to take my glitter. And I'll just add that on there. Tap up all the excess. All right, we're going to add some highlights to our little snowman. So I'm going to add a little bit of highlight right there. We'll add some to our scarf. Once that glue is completely dry, I can brush off any excess glitter. And when it's dry, you will also see a difference in the glitter as well. We're going to add a little bit to his hat. There on the brim. All right. I'm pretty sure there's another piece that's supposed to go behind the hat, but I didn't cut it. So I'm going to add some more sparkle to his little hat. I just took and picked out some rhinestones that were the same color. And I'm going to add this to our card. Make sure we have enough adhesive in there. I gotta have enough to fill my hole, but not enough to ooze out. So here's that. We're going to add one to each little spot because he's a fancy snowman with all his glitters. And I don't have to worry too much about that glue because it does dry clear, so not too big of worried about that right there. All right, here is a look at our card. Here's a closer look at our card that we made together today, with featuring the October 2025 Pixi Dust Designs card sketch. If you like any of these products, you can pick them up in the video description below. And I also have more pictures of today's project on my blog. So if that interests you and that would help you out, you can log over to the blog, check out the pictures. And that's where that supply list will be linked also. Bye, guys. Stay crafty. Love you.